Welcome to the Executive Protection and Secure Transportation Podcast. I'm your host, Larry Snow. The podcast is provided by the International Security Driver Association, and every week we share secure transportation and executive protection headlines, news, trends, and educational content for today's practitioners. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to episode 189 of the EPST podcast. And in this episode and the next, we're going to do something special. We're going to focus on the vehicle attacks, ambushes, or assassinations that have changed the way executive protection and secure transportation practitioners work and train. So what are those events? Those events are Hans Martin Schleyer, Aldo Moro, Alfred Herrhausen, and John Butler. In this episode, I will discuss Hans Martin Schleyer and Aldo Moro. Next week will be Alfred Herrhausen and John Butler, so be sure to tune in. So let's get into it. The ambush and eventual assassination of Aldo Moro and Hans Martin Schleyer were watershed events. These two vehicle attacks happened in the late 1970s, approximately 6 months apart. Before these two events, security practitioners were having a hard time convincing management that moving from point A to point B in a vehicle was a problem that needed some attention. In the late 1970s, the executive protection and the security driving training businesses were in their infancy. Unlike the modern environment with the phrase security driver and secure transportation is used by many as a marketing term, in the 1970s, you could count the number of companies supplying those services on one hand. During that period, a comment Tony Scotti heard many times from executives was, "The terrorists aren't organized. After all, we're dealing with unsophisticated rabble." In their eyes, the solution was to put a guy with a gun next to the driver, and maybe guys with more guns in a vehicle following the principle. Problem solved. Moro and Schleyer got everyone's attention because they had what was considered at the time to be good and effective protection. But they were still kidnapped, and their bodyguard teams were eliminated rather easily. These two vehicle attacks, although decades old, shaped what we do. They were the catalyst for creating an industry. It got the C-suite management thinking that maybe we needed to look at things differently. So let's take a look at the Hans Martin Schleyer scenario. And a little background on Mr. Schleyer from Wikipedia. He was a German member of the SS, a business executive, an employer, and industry representative who served as president of two powerful commercial organizations, the Confederate of German Employers Associations and the Federation of German Industries. Schleyer became a target for radical elements of the German student movement in the 1970s for his role in those business organizations, positions in the labor disputes, aggressive appearance on television, conservative anti-communist views, position as a prominent member of the Christian Democratic Union, and past as an enthusiastic member of the Nazi student movement and a former SS officer. On September 5th, 1977, shortly after 5 p.m., Schleyer left his office in Cologne, Germany to drive home. He took his usual route home in his chauffeur-driven Mercedes. The Bader-Meinhof group could count on the Schleyer two-car convoy to be at a particular intersection near his office. Schleyer is in the lead car, a non-armored Mercedes. He's sitting in the back seat, no other security other than the driver. His car is followed by another non-armored Mercedes with a driver and two security personnel, all police officers. As they turn into the street, there's a Volkswagen microbus parked at the corner. The occupants of the vehicle, of course, are members of the Bader-Meinhof group. About halfway down the street, a car driving in the wrong way down the one-way street approaches Schleier's vehicle. A lady with a baby carriage is standing on the sidewalk. In the baby carriage was an automatic weapon. Also standing on the sidewalk were two other members of the Bader-Meinhof group. The elapsed time at this point is 20 seconds. The car driving the wrong way quickly cuts in front of Schleyer's car and forces his car to turn sharply to the right and drive into the curb. As the blocking car turned into the two-car convoy, the lady pushed the baby carriage into the street This was to block the street in the event Schleier's driver decided to drive around the car that blocked the road. The second car, containing the bodyguards, crashed into the rear of Schleier's car. Elapsed time at this point, 30 seconds. The terrorists, who were parked in the Volkswagen van, walked up to the backup car with the bodyguards in it and fired their weapons, submachine guns and a shotgun, right into the car. The lady with the baby carriage and two other members of the Bader-Meinhof group standing on the side of the road also fired into the bodyguard's car. A passenger in the blocking vehicle came walking up to the driver of Schleier's car and shot him at point-blank range. The shooter was careful not to hit Schleyer. Elapsed time at this point, 40 seconds. Schleyer was taken from the Mercedes and put into the Volkswagen van. As an indication of the planning and organization involved in this ambush and kidnapping, it took about 90 seconds. The van backed out of the street and drove to an underground garage. They put Schleyer into another vehicle and drove away. The obvious planning and attention to detail in this kidnapping was remarkable, even when compared to the precision tactics of other kidnappings. So now let's talk about the scenario for Aldo Moro. The kidnapping of the highly respected elder statesman of Italian politics, Aldo Moro, shocked the world. His kidnapping would be similar to the kidnapping of former President Clinton or Bush. After the kidnapping, Italy came to a standstill. Shortly after 9 a.m., having stopped at a nearby church for communion, Moro was en route to Parliament. He went to the same church at the same time every morning. He established a pattern that was easy to figure out. Every morning, you could count on Aldo Moro being at the same intersection at the same time. Moro was sitting in the back seat of his vehicle with the driver and bodyguards sitting in the front seat. 3 security guards followed in another vehicle, and they were followed by a vehicle with 2 members of the terrorist group, the Red Brigade. As they approached the intersection, there were 4 men dressed in Alitalia airline uniforms standing at the intersection. They appear to be waiting for a bus, but they are members of the Red Brigade. In their flight bags, they had automatic weapons. The Red Brigade vehicle passes and cuts in front of Moro's vehicle and slams on the brakes, causing Moro's car to crash into it. The Red Brigade driver and passenger from the blocking car get out as if to check whether there had been any damages. Approaching Moro's car from both sides, they pulled out pistols and shot the driver and security guard that was sitting in the front seat of Moro's car, killing them instantly. Elapsed time at this point, 15 seconds. At the same time, the 4 men in the Alitalia airline uniforms approached the backup car and with automatic weapons, killing 2 of the 3 instantly. Elapsed time, 20 seconds. The 3rd security officer rolled out of the car onto the street and was able to get 3 shots off before he was neutralized by a fatal shot from a sniper on a nearby roof. Moro was transferred along with a briefcase containing official documents and medications to a different vehicle that pulled up alongside the ambush. They drive away from the ambush. Total elapsed time, 45 seconds. They try to negotiate the release of jailed Red Brigade members. The negotiations failed, and the Red Brigade members assassinated Moro. The obvious planning and attention to detail in this kidnapping was remarkable. The escape route involved entering a restricted street, which was closed off with a padlock chain. The kidnappers were prepared for this with bolt cutters. A simulated accident near the vicinity diverted traffic from the site of the attack. To further the diversion of traffic and pedestrians, false bomb reports were made in other areas. The telephone system was apparently out of order immediately following the attack in the district where the kidnap occurred. The diplomatic license tags on the decoy car had been stolen from the Venezuelan embassy more than a year before the attack. A couple of lessons learned. Moro and Schleyer had the appearance of protection. As a protector, you have to know the difference between real protection and the appearance of protection. Understand your limitations. With Schleyer and Moro, as with many other incidents, the terrorists eliminate the bodyguards swiftly and carefully. In the 2 kidnappings, the bodyguards never had a chance to return fire. And lastly, you need to have the right equipment. That means a vehicle that can do the job. In a high-risk environment, doing the job is defined as an armored vehicle that will stop whatever rounds it is they are going to shoot at you. If you're in a level 4 vehicle and they are firing level 7 rounds, it's like taking a knife to a gunfight. you need the right tools for the job. That'll do it for me this week. Thanks so much for joining me. And again, make sure to tune in next week as we discuss the other game-changing incidents. Also, be sure to subscribe to the podcast from your favorite podcast app so you won't miss future episodes. The accompanying blog post for this episode has links to all the topics I shared. That link is securitydriver.com/podcast. And then scroll down a little bit and click on episode 189. We welcome any comments, feedback on the podcast, or topics that were discussed. If you have a moment, we would really appreciate a review of the podcast. A review helps us make the podcast better because we get your feedback, and it also helps us to reach more people. If you have an interest in going much deeper into these types of topics, I invite you to check out the International Security Driver Association's website and consider joining the membership to gain access to the Encyclopedia of Executive Protection and Secure Transportation, the ISDA Knowledge Center. For more information on all the member benefits, head on over to isdacenter.org.